Hi friends, Pastor Terry here. We are Dalhousie Church and this is the 10-Minute Coach. We've started a new series. We're looking into the 10 Commandments. We began at Easter Sunday. I hope you've had a wonderful Easter weekend. Bless you if you're still in the middle of this while you're still watching this. Christ is risen. And that has changed everything for us who have put our faith and our trust in him. And I'd really like to invite your conversation together around the question of whether this perception that God is a God of love or not, how common that perception is as you interact with friends at work or family members, maybe over the Easter weekend. Conversations were had about the character, the nature of God. Now, I've argued in the message Easter Sunday that the events of that first Easter weekend convey a huge piece of who God is. It tells us about his love, and yet we have popular characterizations, caricatures of God by people like Richard Dawkins, who slam him, who accuse him of horrible character based on their reading of the Old Testament. And I wonder how common that is, and maybe that's worth a bit of conversation together. Where do these characterizations come from, and how do we bring them together? And that's part of the point of coming into the Ten Commandments, is that it's at the very heart of the Old Testament law, or near the heart of the Old Testament law. I'll say something more about that next Sunday, I think. But as we look at the nature of those Ten Commandments, I'm not sure there are many of them that would really be contested. Maybe any of them, where someone would say that's unreasonable. Or that somehow is God being whatever. So where do these other characterizations come from? And maybe it's been a while since you've read through the book of Deuteronomy. I would like to suggest that you do so. I had a couple of professors recommend many years ago that first thing I'd preach when I come to a new church is the book of Deuteronomy. The second thing I'd preach is the book of Ephesians. And we were like, well, why those two books? Well, because the book of Deuteronomy spells out what it was going to mean for the people of Israel to be the people of God, the children of God in this new land. How were they to behave? How were they to live in light of who God is? What were the things that were to distinguish them as God's people? Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus has a similar kind of purpose to it for those of us who are the new people of God, those who are part of the new covenant, those who are followers of Jesus. And that was the basis for it. We'll see whether I get to Ephesians. It's a dense letter and it's a spectacular letter. But I'm off topic because we want to come back to Easter weekend and this idea of have no other gods before me. And I'd like to invite you to discuss what are the nature of the other, what are the other gods that would vie for our attention, vie for our allegiance, vie for our confidence in our world. And what would it mean for me to place the Lord, our God, Yahweh, above all these other places, things, clubs, worldviews, philosophies, supports, government supports, medical supports? What would it mean for me to put God in a category all his own above these? And when might we be honestly guilty of defaulting to something else as authority in our lives rather than God? When might be times that you have looked to something or someone other than God to fulfill a primary need in your life? We're going to spend a couple of Sundays kind of digging into that a little bit more. But for now, we've been in these themes of Easter Sunday, and I've invited you to read again the passages of Scripture which talk about God's love for us. And it was important to me to make sure that I had one really good example from the Old Testament there, because it does demonstrate that I believe it demonstrates this idea that the falsity of the idea that somehow the God of the Old Testament is different than the God of the New Testament. And my hope in the previous series, as we were in the Genesis through Revelation, the Story of God Among Us series, would be to actually see how those threads connect together from Genesis through Revelation, that the God of the Old Testament is consistent with the God of the New Testament. In fact, one of the things about the book of Deuteronomy that is really quite fascinating is it is the place from which Jesus most commonly quoted. If Jesus quoted the Old Testament, he most commonly quoted the book of Deuteronomy. Isn't that fascinating? And so we have these things that kind of bring them together. We have been reading, when we've been in the Old Testament, we're reading the Bible that Jesus read. We're reading the Bible that he quoted. We're reading that which he would say it all, the law and the prophets all pointed to him. They anticipated him and his coming. And we say, well, isn't that fascinating? So perhaps we need to be particularly conversant with this text, not just because it's an ancient text, but because it is a text which informs the entire New Testament, the Gospels. Jesus said that they pointed to him. The authors of the letters following the Gospels are going to be drawing on concepts that are there. A couple of Sundays ago, we were in the book of Hebrews, which significantly draws on the language and the work of especially Exodus, some Leviticus, some of that being repeated in Deuteronomy. So something fundamental that you really need to know here, if you haven't caught this already, is that Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers were composed, or at least primary portions of them were composed by Moses while the children of Israel were wandering. Some of it before they came to Mount Sinai, some of it before they went to Kadesh Barnea, and then the people rejected, and as you may recall, they wandered in the wilderness until a generation died off. Deuteronomy comes after that generation has died off. Moses is preaching to the next generation from the plains of Moab, north end of the Sea of Galilee, before the people are going to go into the promised land with Joshua and Caleb. Moses is not going to be going. That becomes a bit of a sore point. If you read through the first 4 chapters of the book of Deuteronomy, kind of repeatedly, Moses is like, if it wasn't for you, I'd be going into the land. And there are times when I read that and I say, okay, Mo, you're going to have to get over this, man, because you're not going in. And God has good purpose in that as well. Maybe that's me being critical of the scriptures, which are holy, and I regard them and revere them utterly. But they also convey some of the humanity of the people who are in them, including those who are writing it, like Moses. And I'm grateful for that, because I'm a flawed human being myself. So as you kind of dig into this question around the first commandment, around the backstory to the commandment, I've invited you to go back to Exodus chapter 19 and look at the context in which the commandments were given. You could read the Ten Commandments as you see them in Exodus 20. We're going to focus on Deuteronomy chapter 5. We're going to focus over the next 9 Sundays, 10 counting Easter Sunday, from the book of Deuteronomy, and where this kind of goes in shaping the people of God. And there is a twist that I'm going to bring to this, because I started the Easter Sunday message talking about this perception that God is all about the do's and the don'ts. Thou shalt not. I'm hoping that I'm going to help you see these are extraordinarily freeing statements. That, like the rules of an athletic competition, they provide the framework, and we have an awful lot of fun when we work within the framework the rules, because that's where order and beauty and love and an experience of God and an experience of one another is to be found. So that's where we're going in this series. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's really inspiring for you, and that it just rekindles your love for God, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I'm Pastor Terry Lee. We are Dalhousie Church, and this has been the 10-Minute Coach. Bless you, and bye for now.